All right, Shavosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, Tiltum Mishpacha Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this year in the schus of Besoros Tovos for Am Yisrael. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Av, Habalin Latova, Stephen Wendy Drazen, in honor of their parents, Israel Drazen, Dina Drazen, Eileen Rosenzweig, in the memory of Stanley Rosenzweig, Zichron Libracha. And our week of learning sponsors, Abby and Joe Hirsch, with appreciation to the Shir, to the Kehillah, as well as the Schus for the Chayalim and all of those sacrificing for Am Yisrael. And of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the Schus of our precious hostages, Mechel Shmarach L'Mirat Hashem. Bring them home, b'shalom and b'karov, and in the merit of our holy soldiers, may they be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedehem. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, a really incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Mem Daled 44. We are picking up on Mem Gimel, and we left off 3 lines into the wide lines. Mi chayshinon lechashada. So just a quick half a minute of just reorienting ourselves a little bit. So the Gemara told the story of Rabbi Yehuda, who was given the gift of a signet ring. A ring with an image on it. Shmuel saw this ring, and Shmuel said to him, you have to go ahead and blunt the image. You have to somehow damage the image a little bit because it looks like Avoda Zara. Now, one second, we're worried that Rabbi Yehuda is worshipping Avoda Zara? No. But this Gemara introduced the word to us, Mishum Chashada. It looks suspicious. It looks suspect. So because it looks suspect, ultimately, again, you have to do something to kind of blunt or to just, damage the image on the ring. So now the Gemara says, 1 second. Do we have this concept that we have to be concerned that people are going to think that Stama Jew is worshipping idolatry? Like, in other words, this is a pretty big thing that here Shmuel saying to Rabbi Yehuda, you need to somehow, modify the image. When I say modify, like damage or blunt the image, because people are going to think that maybe you're worshipping idolatry. Really? Is that actually something we have to be concerned about? So listen to this. This is a great story. Vaha b'nei knishta d'shaf v'yasiv. There was the shul called Shaf V'Yasiv. That was the name of the shul. Like, not Young Israel of Shaf V'Yasiv, right? Just, again, the base Knesset, Shaf V'Yasiv. Now, what does that mean? This is incredible, Rashi. Look at Rashi. Shaf V'Yasiv is like pumped in the middle of the short lines of Rashi. Shaf V'Yasiv, Shem Makom, Shem Dinas Narda. Now, again, this was the name of a place in Narda. Of course, again, Narda was one of the major Babylonian centers of Torah. Listen to this. V'yesh Omer, Yechanya V'galuso. Listen to this. So some say Shaf V'Yasiv was just the name of the place. It's the name of the place, right? Others say Shaf V'Yasiv is actually descriptive of the shul. Get ready for this. What happened? Some say Yechanya V'galuso, Notlu Meimahen Me'avishayim. Remember again, Yechanya was the king of Yehuda. He was amongst the first wave of exiles, right? Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel. Actually, this is mentioned in Megillas Esther, because who was exiled along with Yechanya? A man by the name of Mordechai. So Mordechai, right? Because remember again, what Nebuchadnezzar did is he exiled nobility, right? First wave, he wanted to get rid of leadership. So listen to this. When Yechanya was exiled, what did he do? This is so beautiful. Natlu imahen me'avne Yerushalayim me'afra. They took with them stones of Yerushalayim and dirt of Yerushalayim. And what did they do? Ubenu sham. And they built a shul in Narda from Jerusalem stone. They took stones and dirt from Yerushalayim and they built a shul. V'hainu t'shaf v'yaseh b'Narda. Nishuf kan v'nesyashe kan. Shaf Yosef, the word means, shaf means to remove, Yosef means to settle. So it was the shul that was built from the stones removed from Yerushalayim, ultimately again rebuilt in Narda. V'nesyashe kan. V'hainu d'chsiv kiratzu avadecha es avaneha. And I will say this is the deeper meaning of the pasuk that says, for your servants even want your stones. Your servants, if we can't have Eretz Yisrael, at least we could have the stones of Eretz Yisrael. I just want to point out how incredibly beautiful this is. From the time that Jews were forced to leave Eretz Yisrael, we can never bring ourselves to totally part. If we can't be in Eretz Yisrael, we'll bring a piece of Eretz Yisrael with us. So Yechanya was the first person to take stones of Yerushalayim and ultimately, again, build a shul in Chutz La'aretz. And I will say, isn't it incredible? We've been doing this for 2,000 years, including this very Beis HaKnesses that we are living in right now, Baruch Hashem. Right? The entire exterior, the walls, the front walls of the main shul, all walls, we call it Jerusalem stone. It's not actually from Yerushalayim, but it's from Eretz Yisrael. Right? I will say, that's what Jews do. Jews bring the stones of Eretz Yisrael, ultimately again, and we build our epicenters of spiritual and religious life wherever we are. Incredible, incredible. Thousands of years we've been doing this. The Gemara goes right there. So what happens? There was this shul in Shafi Yosef, and what happened? The Ikmu Bei Andarta. So it's interesting. What ended up happening is the king made a generally, Andarta, Rashi means a pestle, an idol. So, but again, generally what ended up, Selim. So what ended up happening was kings would often erect the idols of themselves. So what happened? The king put an idol, he put a pestle in the shul. So the Gemara says, and the father of Shmuel and Levi would go and they would daven there. And they weren't concerned that people are going to think that at the end of the day they're worshiping idolatry. So what do you see from here? That you don't have to be concerned with something that looks like idolatry. In other words, what I have to be concerned with is idolatry. That's what I need to be concerned with. Things that look like idolatry, I don't really have to be all that concerned with. To which someone says, no, that's not a good raya. Rabbim shiny. It's different when it's the public, right? When it's a group. And others will both say that halacha l'maisa, when you have a rabbim, so individuals sometimes have to be careful that their actions don't look suspect. But the collective, the rabbim, need not be concerned. We're not concerned that the rabbim are worshiping Avoda Zara. So therefore, again, because a shul is a makom rabbim, is a place of the public, therefore, halacha l'maisa, there was no problem. The Gemara says, Rabbi Gamliel. So we'll say, so remember again, we're in this whole discussion now. Why? Because of Rabbi Gamliel. What's the issue of Rabbi Gamliel? What did he have? He had his images of the moon. So remember again, this whole Gemara is just trying to figure out how is he justified in having that? How is that permitted? Rabbi Gamliel, the Yachid Hava. Rabbi Gamliel was an individual, and Rabbi Gamliel had images of the moon. So how was he able to have that? Isn't that suspect, right? Doesn't that look suspicious, like idolatry? Kevan the Nasi who shrichi Rabin Gabe. Since he was the Nasi, there was always a lot of people around him. Right? In other words, he was always being asked shilas, people always coming for advice. So because of that, his home was a public space. And because of that, again, it was considered to be rabbin. So most of this is very interesting. What the Gemara is introducing to us is something fascinating, which is, even if there's a suspicion of something that looks idolatrous in nature, that only applies to individual behavior. The collective is never suspect of idolatry. I will say, you understand the power of this yesod? As individuals, by definition, we are weaker. As a collective, the klal is always the strongest cohesive entity. So the klal is never suspect. The klal is never individuals, when I'm alone, I have to be careful that my behavior doesn't look idolatrous. When I'm part of the klal, there's no such suspicion. Rabbi Gamliel, isn't he an individual? No, he's the nasi. He's the nasi. So because he's the nasi, he almost has the status of the klal. People always say the other possibility is very interesting. The prakim havi, that his models, his moon models, were made up of pieces. And therefore, I will say it's very interesting. Rashi points out over here, Shal Chulios, Velo Hayu Mechabrim Ella B'Shas B'Dikas Eidim, V'Chol Yom Lo Chazule V'Leka Chashada. It was made of pieces. So what happened? Most of the time it was disassembled. It's only when they had to declare the new month and witnesses were coming forward that he would assemble it. So because the primary amount of time it was in a state of disassembly, therefore there's no chashad, there's no suspicion that it looks like idolatry. People say the other possibility is, it's very interesting. Lehislamed shiny. Why did he have? In general, when you need to learn about Avoda Zara, you are allowed to learn about it. So sometimes a person, in order to answer shilas, in order to know what's mutter, what's asar, a person has to have a deeper understanding of certain concepts. So therefore, to learn about idolatry, even if that requires me to, let's say again, have the models that's permitted. So interestingly enough, the Gemara says, you should not learn the ways of the Avoda Zara in order to go ahead and perform Avoda Zara. But you are permitted to go ahead and to learn in order to understand and to be able to instruct. So once again, because Rabbi Gamliel is fashioning, so the Gemara is suggesting, according to his last answer, is you're right. You should not construct models of the moon or of the sun or of the stars. You should not do that. Rabbi Gamliel is different. Why? He needs it in order to be able to declare the new month. How else are you going to ascertain if the witnesses are really fully telling the truth? Okay, so it turns out that the Gemara gives a variety of different answers over here. Either, again, that he constructed the models ultimately, again, because he needed it in order to understand the sanctification of the new moon or in order to test the witnesses, right? Number two, it was made of pieces, therefore was not in a constant state of assembly. Or number three, because he's like the rabbim, therefore there's no real issue of suspicion that it looks idolatrous in nature. Okay, so the Gemara goes right. Rabbi Shmuel Omer. So remember again, Rabbi Shmuel said the only time that there's liability for these images is ala mechubadim, when you put it on utensils that are respectable. But if you put it on non-respectable utensils, it's not a problem. So says the Gemara, okay, what does that mean? The Gemara says, so what are considered to be respected utensils and what are considered to be degraded utensils? So this is very interesting. Rav says it's not as much dependent on the utensil as much as where the image is on the utensil. So if the image is above what we'll call the water line, right, above the line of the utensil that you would fill up with contents, that's called mechubad. That's nice. That's because that's clear that it's more decorative. If it's on the lower part of the kli, ultimately, again, that's not bakavadik, and therefore it's not a problem. Shmuel says, no. Elu ve'elu mavuzin. No, both of these are considered to be mavuzin, degraded. The Gemara says, Ella, Elohein mechubadin, what's considered to be an honorable image, she'al hashirin va'al hanezomim va'al tabos. Shmuel said, this is very interesting. Shmuel says it's kli dependent. So when you go ahead and you place any of these images on jewelry, that's when it's considered to be honorific, right? That's when it's considered to be ultimately, again, mechubad, something meaningful. So, for example, you put it on bracelets or nose rings or regular rings, then that's fine. But if you were to place it, let's say, on utilitarian utensils, a pot, a glass, that's considered to be mavuzin, degraded, and therefore not avodah zara. Tanya Kavas di Shmuel, we have a rice that supports Shmuel. Mechubadin shalashirin v'alanazon v'alatabos. So again, it's considered to be an honored image when it's on jewelry. When it's on jewelry, mevuzin, a degraded image, when shal hayoros va'al hakum kumasin va'al mechame chamin shal asadinin v'alamit pachos. If you put it on sheets, if you put it on your kumkum, right? You put it on your pot, you put it on your urn, you put it on your glasses. Any service utensils upon which you put the image, ultimately, again, the image is going to be mavuzeh, degraded, not avodah zara. You put it on idolatry, you put it on jewelry, that's considered to be chashiv. Ultimately, again, that's mechubadin. Incredible. Now, both say, so we're going to move on to the Mishnah now. What I just want to point out, I hope someone is keeping track of all the topics that we do have to go back to at some point. This topic is actually quite an interesting one, which we don't have the bandwidth now to go into the topic. But again, Lamaisa, the concept of images. And what images are you allowed to create, recreate, regular image, one-dimensional images, three-dimensional images, human images. So again, these are halachic issues that have to be dealt with. But Emir Hashem, we will find the time. But just kind of keep note that again we haven't done this sugya like kind of now in retrospect most of the sugyas in Avodah Zara, proper halacha l'maisa justice. But at least we're familiarizing ourselves with the concepts. Let's go back to Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says, Shochek v'zar l'ruach. So I'll say a little bit of context over here. If you go ahead and you find a metal avodah zarah, we actually mentioned this before. What do you do with metal? You go ahead and you grind it down and you spread the remnants into the wind. That's Rabbi Yossi. Oh, matiliyam, or throw it into the sea. Amrulo. Afuna says zevel. So the Tanakama or the Rabbanon disagree with Rabbi Yossi. And it's Rabbi Yossi, you can't crush the metal, you can't grind it down and spread it into the wind. Why? Because it could inadvertently act as fertilizer, ultimately again for a field. Okay, the Gemara says Shneimar lo yidbak biyadcha mu'uma min achirim. And says problematic. Why? Because when it comes to Avoda Zara, you really are not permitted to get any level of benefit ultimately again from Avoda Zara. Okay, let's analyze Tanya. Rabbi Yossi says, one second. So again, Rabbi Yossi says with Avoda Zara, one of the options for destruction is grind it down and essentially spread the residue, spread the ashes, right? Scatter the ashes to the wind. And the Rabbanan say you can't do that because you may come to inadvertently get benefit, like a fertilizer type benefit. Let's analyze. Tanya, I'm not Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, one second, I have precedent for what I am suggesting. What's my precedent? V'halo kvar ne'emar ve'eschataschem, top of Memdalid, asher asisim esa ega lakachti, ve'esrov oso ba'ish, ve'akos oso tachon hetev, ad asher duk, ve'ashlich es afaro el hanachal hayored min hahar. So again, I will say we have biblical precedent. What's biblical precedent? Chumash Devarim. We have the great schus to begin Chumash Devarim this Shabbos. And so we'll say, so what's the precedent? What did Moshe Rabbeinu do with the egel? What did they do with the egel? He ground it down and then spread the dust in the water. So Yossi says, you see. Now, what's fascinating, by the way, about this is there's a fundamental machlokes exactly what the egel was. Was the golden calf idolatry or was it leadership? So it's clear from the Gemara over here that Rabbi Yossi understands it, that it was idolatry. It was Avoda Zara. But yet what Rabbi Yossi is saying is, look, what did Moshe Rabbeinu do with the Avodah? What did he do? He ground it up. So what do you see from here? That grinding up Avoda Zara is a legitimate form of destruction. Amrulo misham raya. So Amrulo, they said to him, the Rabbanan said back to Rabbi Yossi, that's your proof. Hariyu Omer, vayizar al pnei hamayim, vayash es bnei Yisrael. Now remember, there's a follow-up to this. It's true. Moshe Rabbeinu ground down. He ground down. Okay, good. He destroyed, right? He destroyed the egel, and he took the ashes. I'm using the word ashes. You understand a little bit liberally. Right? He took the ashes and he put it in the water. Why? Because then Klal Yisrael drank from the water. And what happened over here? The Gemara says, "Lo niskaven el lebotkan kisotos." This was supposed to be like a sota type of situation, where halacha l'maisa again, what was occurring over here? So again, so Moshe Rabbeinu was taking the ashes, put it on the water, and Klal Yisrael was to drink it. So this is not a raya. Why? Because we're both saying, well, remember, Rabbi Yossi is just saying stam. You could take Avoda Zara, grind it up, and scatter the ashes. Here, you can't bring a raya from the egel, because this was a clearly choreographed process, and the process could only unfold with the ground up egel. So you can't necessarily bring a raya from this other forms of Avoda Zara. Okay, Amar Lahab Rabbi Yossi, Valok Var Nemar. Rabbi Sfam, another proof. Valok Var Nemar, there's a very interesting case here. The Gam es Ma'acha Imo Hesira Migvira Asher Asta Miflatzisa Vayidak Vayisrof Benachal Kidron. So we'll say the Gemara quotes the pasuk from Divrei Yomim. This is talking about King Asa. King Asa was one of the kings of Yehuda. Ultimately, again, a righteous king. When he assumed the throne, the first thing he did is he deposed his mother, who was evil. Right? His mother was an idolatress. So he goes ahead. So literally, the pasuk says he deposed his mother, his mother Ma'acha. And then what did he do? He took her Avoda Zara, he ground it up, and he put it in the Kidron Valley. Now that's interesting. Rabbi Yossi says, so now what's Rabbi Yossi's proof? What do you see from here? Now the Kidron Valley, Rabbi say, again, don't you have to be concerned that the ground up Avoda Zara is going to be like fertilizer? But you see, that wasn't a concern. So from here, Rabbi Yossi says, what do you see from here? That halacha l'maisa, there is no problem in grinding up Avoda Zara. Amrulo, misham rayas, they said to Rabbi Yossi, that's not a good proof. Nachal Kidron eno megadal tzmachin. It's very interesting. Nothing grows in the Kidron Valley. So therefore, again, what? Therefore, no fertilizer worries. No fertilizer worries. Okay, nothing grows in the Kidron Valley. Gemara says, really? Is that true? Below? Vatanya elu ve'elu mis'arvin ba'am aviyotz l'nachal Kidron v'nimkar l'ganan l'zevel. So we'll say, one second. I will say there was a very interesting process in the Beis HaMikdash. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, elu ve'elu tamim hachitzon v'damim hapnimiyim sheshireim nishpachin al yisod mizbeach hachitzon v'hein yardin min hayisod l'rispa. Supposed to say, now listen to this. In the Beis HaMikdash itself, so remember again, there was a lot of blood, right? A lot of karbanos. there was a drainage system in the Beis HaMikdash, right? And the drainage system, this will say, it's fun. What do they do in the Beis HaMikdash? Spongia, right? They would go ahead and essentially, how would they clean up everything? They would plug up the drain, fill the floor, right? Essentially turn on the water, flood the water, then open up the drain, and that would go ahead and they would sponge out everything. That's how they clean the floor. Where did everything go? So there was a drainage system that took the blood out and it funneled into the Kidron Valley. Now, I will say, interestingly enough, when it would come out there, what would happen? The temple treasurer would sell this water blood mixture to the local farmers. Right, to the local farmers. They would use it as fertilizer. Now, I will say, you had to buy it, right? Why did you have to buy it? Because it was hegdish. So if you bought it, then again, you redeemed it, right? The same thing was transferred onto the money went to the Beis HaMikdash, and then you could use your fertilizer. That's how the Gemara says, if you just took this mixture and used it as fertilizer without purchasing it, that's me'ilah. Me'ilah, illegal use, illegal mundane use of consecrated temple property. So what do you see from here? Now, where are these farmers? These farmers are in the Kidron Valley. That's where they are. They're in the Kidron Valley. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, ultimately, again, you see that they are going ahead, and the Kidron Valley does have an issue of planting. You just said before the Kidron Valley the Kidron Valley does not grow anything, but here it clearly does. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Mekomos yeshba. There are many different sections in the Kidron Valley. Some parts of the Kidron Valley, ultimately, again, you could grow stuff in. Other parts, you cannot. The Gemara says, Yesh makom megadol tzmachim, v'yesh makom she'eno megadol tzmachim. Some places are able to grow with tzmachim, I mean just growths, and other places cannot. Okay, so Gemara says, by the way, so now, therefore the Gemara says, it's not really such a good raya. Fine. My miflet sasa. So we'll say, so remember again, let's go back for just a second. Rabbi Yossi brought a proof. What was his proof? That Asa destroyed his mother's Avoda Zara, and then what did he do? He scattered the ashes. He scattered the ashes in the Kidron Valley. So, interestingly enough, it says he destroyed Miflet Sasa. So the Gemara says, what does that mean? Amar Rav Yehuda, Dahava Methalia Leitzanusa. She didn't just worship idolatry, but she did so in a way that amplified like a sense of mockery. Leitzanus, a real leitzanus, a real sense of mockery. What did she do? Kedetani Rav Yosef, Kemin Zachros, Asis Salah, V'haisen Niv Eles Lo B'chol Yom. Okay, so this, you don't hear this every day, right? So what did she do? She endowed her idol with a male member and went ahead and had relations with her idol every day. There's an idol every day. So again, we'll say, Lamaisa, what this means at the end of the day is, see, here's what's interesting. So the Gemara understands that there's idolatry. Right? There's idolatry. Right? Remember, I will say the most basic sort of idolatry. What's the most basic sort of idolatry? Most basic sort of idolatry is you see phenomena that happen in the natural world, and you describe divinity to those natural phenomena. That's all idolatry is, and it's if you think about it, it's not crazy. Right? It's not a crazy thing. You could see how someone could come to go ahead and worship the sun, the moon, and the stars. After all, again, they're magnificent. Now, obviously, we understand they're not deities. They're creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But you could see how a person could go theologically askew and come to worship these things. Even again, interestingly enough, remember again, back by Parshas Vayera, Avram Avinu tells the three malachim they have to wash their feet before they come into the tent. Rashi HaKadosh says, why? Because he thought they were Arabim. He thought they were Arabs who worshipped the dust. The Maharal in Gur Aryeh says, why would anyone worship dust? He says it makes a lot of sense. The Arabs were nomadic. If you're a nomad, what's the one thing you have wherever you go? Dust. As such, it makes sense that they would ascribe theological importance to the thing that was present with them in every area of their life. But then you see things that are just ridiculous. We'll say, by the way, even Baal Pa'ar, which we'll discuss, even Baal Pa'ar makes absolute sense. It makes absolute sense. Why? We spoke about this before. They'll say, it's not so far off. right? After we go to the bathroom, we say Asher Yatzar. Why? Because we see the hand of God in the body working the normal way. Okay, so what did Baal Pa'ar do? Baal Pa'ar took that a little bit too far. But in that, what they're doing, but then you see stuff that's just ridiculous. You see stuff that's, even Molech, sacrificing children. Okay, so what does it mean sacrificing the child? You're taking that which is most important to you, and you're saying to your deity, I love you even more than I love my child. It's corrupted, but you could see the hashkafa in it. But then there are things that are just so ridiculous that the Gemara says that's ridiculous. So again, this woman having relations with her idol, having relations with her idol every day, ultimately, again, that's miflat susa, that's mefilat sinusa. So that's just an amplification, ultimately, again, of just ridiculous behavior. So we're saying, Rabbi Yosef, good. Gemara says as follows: Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi. So they said, so Amrullah Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said to them, "V'alo kvar ne'emar v'kites nachash nachoshesh asher asa Moshe." Listen to this. It's one of the things that King Tzidkiyahu did is he took the copper stick. Remember again, Avosai, during one of the complaint sessions that our ancestors had in the desert, there was an outbreak of poisonous snakes. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He constructed a copper snake, the Nechushtan, and he said, if you look at this snake, ultimately again you'll be cured. Now it wasn't really looking at the snake; it was to channel Klal Yisrael to look upwards, right? King Tzidkiyahu destroyed the Nechushtan. So instead, it was kept throughout all the generations. King Tzidkiyahu destroyed it. So the Gemara says, why did he do it? Now, again, why did he do this? He did this because they are worshiping it. They're worshiping it. Now, what did he do? And he went ahead, Amrullah Mishamraya. So again, I will say, he just destroyed it. He ground it up. Amrullah Mishamraya, they said to Rabbi Yossi, that's your proof. Harei Omer, Vayomer Shalom Moshe, Sei Lecha Sraf. It's not even a good proof. I'll tell you why. Well, say interestingly enough, Moshe Rabbeinu made that copper snake out of his own money, and therefore ve'ein adam oser davar she'eino shalo. It will say you cannot answer something that is not yours. This is very important. I will say, imagine for a moment, I really dislike Ruvain, so I decide, what, I'm going to get Ruvain. Ruvain just pulls up in his new car. I go to it and I bow down to it. I worship it. I say, now your new car is Aser, it's Avoda Zara. And Avoda Zara is Aser Ba'ana, and Avoda Zara of a Jew is even worse. You can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because you cannot Aser something that does not belong to you. So interestingly enough, the Gemara notes over here, the copper snake was made from Moshe Rabbeinu's own money. So because that belonged to Moshe Rabbeinu, even if Klal Yisrael worshipped it as a deity, they could not aser it. If that's the case, then why did Tzidkiyahu destroy it? V'hasam bedinhu tikasusi lohavit tzarech. Tzidkiyahu didn't have to grind it up. Elakevin dechazai dikatol Yisrael basrei amad v'kisiso. Since he saw that Klal Yisrael was worshipping it, therefore he went ahead and he ground it up. Okay. Remember again, Rabbi Yossi keeps on trying to prove his point that grinding up of Avodah Zara is a legitimate form of destruction, and you need not be concerned with getting some type of benefit, like fertilizer benefit, from the ashes, from the ground up dust. So we'll say the pasuk says, in one of the wars that David HaMelech went ahead and waged. So what happens? So his enemies fled and they left Atzabehem. What are Atzabehem? They're idols, right? They left their idolatry there. Vayisaim David va'anashav. And David and his men, Vayisaim, my says, my mashma, the high Vayisaim David, Lishna Dizaruyehu. Now Rabbi Yossi obviously understands that Vayisaim means David HaMelech ground it up. He took the idolatry and he ground it up. So says, by the way, where do you see that Vayisaim means to ground up? Rabbi Yosef, Tizreim v'ruach tisaim. Because the pasuk says, Tizreim v'targaminon tazrinon. Ruach taltiltilun. So ultimately, again, it means to grind up. So the lashon of Vayisaim ultimately, again, means to grind up Avodah Zara. So you see from here, what did David HaMelech do? David HaMelech ground up Avodah Zara, so grinding up is a legitimate form of destruction. That's your proof. Hari Omer, Vayisrafu ba'esh. It says they burnt it. Not that they ground it up. Umidloksiv, Vayisrafum, Vayisum, Shmamina, Vayisum, Mamish. And doesn't say Vayisum and Vayisrafum, it just says Vayisum. So what do you see from here? That ultimately, again, Vayisum means maybe just they lifted it up. They lifted it up and they took it to burn it, but they didn't grind it up. Mikol Mokom, Kosher Kraya Dadi. So I'll say, either way, we have a contradiction. One pasuk says that David HaMelech ground it up, and one pasuk says that David HaMelech lifted it. So which one is? I will say this is fascinating. The Gemara says, "Kid Rav Huna Rami Ksiv, Vayomer David Vayisrafu Ba'esh, Uksiv Vayisaum." Rav Huna himself noted this contradiction. What did David HaMelech do with the Avoda Zara of his vanquished enemy? One pasuk says that he ground it up. One pasuk says that one pasuk says that he ground it up. One pasuk says that he burnt it. What's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, "Lo kasha." It's not a contradiction. Kodem sheba ita hagiti, kan la'achar sheba ita hagiti. So we'll say this is very interesting. One was before Itai came, one was after Itai came. So ultimately, we'll say, so again, I'm sorry, let me say it a little bit differently. In this context, they're understanding that Vayisaum literally means to carry, right? This is version 2. In version 1, Vayisaim meant to grind up. In version 2, Vayisaim means to carry. So one pasuk says David HaMelech carried it. One pasuk says David HaMelech burnt it. How do you reconcile it? So we'll say, watch this. One was before Ite Agiti, one was after Ite Agiti. Who was Ite Agiti? Ite Agiti was a man from Gat who was a Gentile in Akum who defected to David HaMelech's team. He defected to Klal Yisrael. Now watch this. We learned in yesterday's daf, and Akum has tremendous power. Every human being has tremendous power. What can Akum do that a Jew cannot do? An Akum can be mevatel avoda Zara. Isn't that incredible? Only an Akum can be mevatel avoda Zara. So watch this. Before Ite Agiti came along, so David HaMelech, what did he do? He went ahead and he burnt the avoda Zara. But after Ite Agiti came along and negated the avoda Zara, right? He what was the word? Not negated. Decommissioned. Thank you. Decommissioned the Avoda Zara. Mevatel the Avoda Zara. Then what? Then his mutter. By Yisrael, David HaMelech took it. He lifted it. So interestingly enough, before Itai burned it, after Itai Agiti, ultimately again he took it for himself. The Gemara says, "Vayikach es ateres malkam me'al rosho umishkala kikar zav." So it says, fascinating. One of the things that David HaMelech did is he took Ateres Malkam. Now Rashi points out over here something very interesting. Ateres Malkam b'bnei Ammon kai. This was in the war against Ammon. Va'avodas kochavim shalahem Malkam shma. Now this is fascinating. When you read the pasuk, it sounds like it's saying David HaMelech took the crown of their king. He took the crown of their Avoda Zara. Their Avoda Zara was named Malkam. That was the name of it. The idol itself had this massive crown. And what did David do? He took it for himself. Took it for himself. The Gemara says, So the Gemara says, whoa, how are you allowed to do that? Mishari, Yisrei Hana. What's the first wide line? How could David HaMelech do that? Yisrei Hana. It's Asher Ba'ana. How is he allowed to go ahead and take the crown? After all, again, the crown is not permitted for benefit. It belongs to Avoda Zara. So again, Ite Agiti came, he went ahead and he decommissioned the crown, and David HaMelech took it for himself. Incredible. The Gemara says, 1 second. Mishkala kikar zav hechi matzi manachla. So we'll say, a crown that is 1 kikar of gold is very heavy. How was David HaMelech able to wear that upon his head? No, you're right. David HaMelech didn't wear it. What it's saying is it was fit for a king, right? It was a crown fit for a king. That's first answer. Evan sho'eves haisaba dahavas darala. So we'll say this is fascinating. David HaMelech had a magnet embedded in his throne, and this is how he was able to wear that crown, a very strong magnet. So essentially, kind of the magnet either hovered or kind of just sat gently on his head, but the magnet kept it a bit suspended. Fascinating. Rabbi Lazar Omar, Evan Yikara Haisaba Sheshava Kikar Zav. No. It does not mean that the crown was the weight of a kikar. Rather, what does it mean? It means that the weight had a precious stone in it that was as valuable as a kikar of gold. Incredible. Okay, so we'll go weiter. Zos haisali kipikudecha natsarti. So we'll say, now that we started on the topic of David HaMelech, we're going to continue a little bit with David HaMelech as well. A very beautiful, again, in Tehillim, David HaMelech says, Zos haisali, this was to me, or this was for me, because I kept your commandments. My kamar, what is David HaMelech saying? Hachi kamar, b'schar shepikudecha natsarti, zos haisali le'edos. David HaMelech says, because I kept your mitzvos, this referring to the crown that he took from Avoda Zara. This was ultimately, again, the testament that I always heeded your word and always, gave my allegiance to you. The Gemara says, "My edusa." How does the crown give testimony? Oh, Rabbi Shmuel Levi, this is incredible. Shaymaniach b'makom tefillin v'hol masal. We will say there was a miracle that when David HaMelech put on his crown, whether it's this crown or just a general crown that he wore, the crown always tailored to his head. He would put it by the makom tefillin, by where it would cover, it would go up to right up to where he would put on his tefillin, and the crown would custom fit to his head. The Gemara says, tefillin. 1 second. You have to put on tefillin. How are you putting on tefillin if you're wearing your crown? In fact, Rabbi say, if you look at it, you will find that there is actually enough space on the head to wear 2 pairs of tefillin. So ultimately, again, the crown covered one, and there was still enough space for the king to still wear his tefillin. Interesting enough, even with you see this a lot in Eretz Yisrael by some of the Sfardim, right, who wear 2 pairs of tefillin. They're very, very small pairs of tefillin, and they wear it together. They literally one in front of the other. So halacha l'maisa again, because there is space in the top of the head for 2. So which is very beautiful is David HaMelech apparently wore his tefillin with his crown, which is a very, very beautiful image about a Melech Yisrael, right? The crown of monarchy together with the tefillin, which is the crown of the Ribono Shel Olam. So beautiful. Vayotziu es ben HaMelech, vayitnu alav es hanezer, ve'es ha'edus. Supposed to listen to this. So this is by King Yoash. So what happens? King Yoash was anointed as a child. They brought out the son of the king, Yoash, and they went ahead and they put on him the nezer, which means the crown, and the edus, and the testimony. The Gemara says, nezer zu kalila. Right, so crown, so nezer literally means the crown. Eidos, what does eidos mean? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amarav, eidos hila beis David, shekala roi lemalchus hol masal, v'chin kol she'eno roi lemalchus ein hol masal. Rabbi said there was a miracle amongst the Davidic kings. What was the miracle? How did you know if you were fit for Davidic monarchy? If you put the crown on and the crown tailored itself to your head, you were a Davidic king or a fit Davidic king. But if you put the crown on and the crown did not mold itself to your head, then you were not fit for the throne. Absolutely incredible. So this miracle obviously started with David HaMelech, and here's another example of it happening with Yoash. So we'll say the Gemara tells a story where it didn't work. So we'll say at the end of Sefer Malachim, right? Adonio, who was the son of David HaMelech. David HaMelech is dying, he's on his deathbed. And interestingly enough, David was not explicit about his successor. As much as he knew it was going to be Shlomo, everybody knew it was going to be, he never said it. Because he never said it, his son Adonio exploited a little bit of like the vacuum in power. In other words, so David HaMelech is dying on his deathbed. Adonio assembles a group, he assembles a chevra, and he proclaims himself, Misnaseh Leimar, Ani Amloch. Not now, when my father dies, I'm going to be king. Rabbi Yehuda, Amarav, Shemisnaseh Lahomo, V'Lahomo. He tried to get the crown to fit his head, but the crown did not fit his head. And he made for himself again like a cavalry and runners, right, chariots and runners, and 50 men used to run in front of him. See, he had an entourage. The Gemara says, "My Rabu Sayu." What was unique about his runners and his cavalry? Tana kulam netule tchol v'chakuke kapos haraglayim hayu. All of his runners had their spleen removed. And apparently, again, like the arches of their feet hollowed out. So apparently, a spleen slows you down. Who knew, right? So somehow they had their spleens probably not removed, but just somehow they did something that caused it to no longer operate. And they took some type of, what they did is they removed certain nerves from their foot so that they should be able to run barefoot without feeling anything. So that's the end of the sugya. I just point out the tremendous Musar Haskell in this. So what happened? How did you know if you were fit for Davidic monarchy? If the crown went ahead and fit your head. Adonio ben Chagis puts it on, and Lamais again, the crown does not fit him. I will say, in life, it is so incredibly important to find the crown that fits you. We spend so much time trying to be someone else instead of figuring out who we're really supposed to be and maximizing that identity, right? I want to be like this one. I want to be like that one. And I spend my life trying to wear crowns that don't really fit me. And we'll say, what happens when you spend time trying to wear crowns that don't fit you? You spend all of your energy, all of your time balancing it on your head so that it doesn't fall off. The avoda in life is not to wear someone else's crown. The avoda in life is to find your crown. Who are you? What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from you? As the Ramchal writes, Ma chovaso ba'olamo. What is your obligation in this world? And your obligation is different than my obligation. We have to find our own crown, find our own identity, find our own mission, find our own mandate. Why was I put here on this world? And if I try to mimic your mission, that is going to be an unfulfilling life. Just like if I try to wear David HaMelech's crown, it's not going to fit on me. Find your mission, find your mandate, find your shlichos, find your crown, figure out why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put you here on this world, and ultimately actualize that beautiful sacred mission. Mishnah B'asai Amud Beis. Shal, this is a fascinating Gemara. Shal Proklus ben Philusphus es Rabbi Gamliel ba'Akko. So this guy, Proklus ben Philusphus. So we'll say Rashi points out over here, Proklus min Oved Kochavim. So again, he was a min, it wasn't Oved Kochavim. He was an idolater. So his name was Proklus, but interestingly enough, ben Philusphus. Philusphus just sounds like what? Like a philosopher. So whether that was actually his father's name or that was just a descriptive, right? But again, so this guy Proklus asks Rabbi Gamliel in Akko, this is crazy, She'erochitz b'merchatz shel Aphrodite. Rabbi Gamliel was bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite. Okay, so Aphrodite is one of the Greek gods. Bathing in the bathhouse of Aphrodite. Amrle. So again, so Proklus begins the conversation with Gamliel in the bathhouse. Amrle, kasub b'saraschem lo yidbak b'yadchem u'men acherem. He says to Gamliel, how were you able to bathe in this bathhouse of Aphrodite? After all, it says, you're not allowed to benefit from idolatry. By the way, this is the historical example of starting up a conversation with someone in the bathroom. Don't do it, right? There's one simple mission when you go to the lavatory, right? Take care of business and get out. It's not small talk. It's not, hey, how you doing? Certainly not a pat on the back, right? In other words, right, in and out. Very few conversations need to occur over there. Right? So poor Rabbi Gamliel just went ahead. He went to the bathhouse. And meanwhile, again, Proklus is beginning a whole conversation with him. How are you able to be here? At the end of the day, right, your Torah says you're not allowed to benefit from idolatry at all. So, how are you able to bathe in the bathhouse of Aphrodite? So interestingly enough, now we're going to discuss exactly where he said this, but Gamliel said to him, you're not allowed to engage in conversations in the bathhouse. Okay? We'll discuss exactly when he said that. Rashi says over here, Ein Mashivin, Divrei Torah Merchatz, Lefi Sha'adam Omeid Arum. You can't engage in Torah in the bathhouse. Why? Because people are not clothed. So because people are not clothed, you can't engage in Torah over there. Okay. Ukeshayatsa Amarlo, Rabbi Gamliel came out of the bathhouse. He said to Proklus, he said to him the following: Ani lo basi bigvula, he ba'a bigvuli. So again, we'll discuss all of these answers. At the end of the day, see, he says, I didn't come to Aphrodite, Aphrodite came to me. As Gamliel said, and Rashi points out, what does this mean? Look at Rashi. He bought big vulisha, merchatz kodim la, v'merchatz nasa l'chol haba l'merchatz, v'lo kol hemen ashetei gozeles es harabim. So essentially what he was saying was as follows. The bathhouse was here before Aphrodite. In other words, the idol of Aphrodite came later. So the bathhouse was here first. It's not Aphrodite's bathhouse. It was our bathhouse. Then the idol came later. That was answer one. The Gemara says, furthermore, Ein omrim nase merchatz l'noi l'Aphrodite, ela omer nase Aphrodite ner l'merchatz. So ultimately, again, the bathhouse was not made as a decoration for Aphrodite. Rather, Aphrodite was made as decoration for the bathhouse. So essentially what he was saying to Proklus is, your question is fundamentally flawed, because you're looking at the bathhouse as Aphrodite's bathhouse. If it's Aphrodite's bathhouse, then Einach Hinami, how can I go out and get benefit? It's not Aphrodite's bathhouse, it's bathhouse. Later on, someone donated an idol of Aphrodite there, but again, it's not her bathhouse. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara goes weiter. Good. Okay, the more Rashi will come to that. Davracher. Furthermore, good. Davracher in Nostin l'cham mamon harbe. So this is a continuation of Rabbi Gamliel's answer to Proklus. He says, furthermore, I'll tell you why it's not problematic. In Nostin l'cham mamon harbe. Let's say he's saying this to Proklus, to the Akum, Proklus. Someone to give you a lot of money. You would not go into your idolatry unclothed. In other words, even if somebody offered you a lot of money, you would not be disrespectful to your idol, to go into unclothed, or bal keri, after having a ceremonial mission, or mashem ifanah, you wouldn't urinate in front of it. And yet, when you look at this idol Aphrodite, zu omedes al pi abiv, the chala'am said this, where was the idol of Aphrodite? It was by the gutter. In other words, we're supposed to remember again, the bathhouse has a whole drainage system. Where was the idol? The idol was positioned right near the drainage, right? And not only that, people would urinate right there as well. The Gemara says, Lo ne'emar ela Eloheim so before we read this line, so the point over here is Rabbi Gamliel was saying to Proclus, furthermore, it's clear that no one really treats this idol as a deity. Why? This is because even you over the Avoda Zara, you treat your idol with derech eretz, you treat your idol with respect. Look how Aphrodite is treated over here, right? People are urinating there. It's right by the drainage from the bathhouse, and the pasuk says, Lo namar ela Eloheihem. Well, the issur of idolatry is when the idol is treated as a deity, as a god. When the idol is treated as a god, that's when it's asur. But if the idol is not treated as a god, but rather the idol is treated in a disparaging way, as is occurring with Aphrodite, ultimately, again, there's no Avoda Zara. So we'll say, it's interesting that Rabbi Gamliel seems to be advancing two arguments. Argument number one is that this is not Aphrodite's bathhouse. Why not? The bathhouse was before Aphrodite. Aphrodite was introduced later on. Number two, this Aphrodite idol is not even really an Avoda Zara. Why not? Because people treat it in a disparaging fashion. And the only time something is considered to be an Avoda Zara is when people treat it with derech eretz, and this idol is not treated with derech eretz. Incredible Gemara. Vehechi avitaki. 1 second. Now, what's interesting enough when you look at the story. So, right, how did this all start? Rabbi Gamliel's in the bathhouse. Proclus approaches him, asks him a shayla, and Rabbi Gamliel says, "Ein mashivin bebeis hamerchas." I can't talk Torah with you in the beis hamerchas. They both say that statement of "I can't talk Torah with you in the bathhouse." That statement itself is Torah. So how is Rabbi Gamliel able to say that in the bathhouse? You're allowed to think about Torah anywhere, but you can't even think about it. You can't even cogitate on Torah in the bathhouse or in the bathroom. So maybe he said it to him in not in Hebrew, not in Lashon HaKodesh, whatever. He said it to him in Greek, some other language. From Rabbi, Dvarim Shalchal Mutalam B'Lashon HaKodesh. You could say mundane talk in Hebrew in the bathhouse. Dvarim Shal Kodesh Asalam B'Lashon Chol. But you're not even allowed to say mundane words. You can't even say Torah words, right? Torah words, even in mundane language, right? Even in non-Hebraic form. So the Gemara is essentially asking, how was Rabbi Gamliel able to respond to Proclus in the bathhouse? The Gemara says, you're right, Tana, Kishayatsa Amarlo, Ein Mashivim Amerchaz. You're right. In the bathhouse itself, interestingly enough, Rabbi Gamliel did not respond. He didn't say anything. When they got out of the bathhouse, ultimately, again, Rabbi Gamliel said to Proclus, I'm sorry, I didn't answer you in the bathhouse. Ein mashivin bebeis hamerchas. You cannot talk Torah, you can't respond in the bathhouse. That's why I did not respond to you in the bathhouse itself. Incredible. So Rabbi Chama bar Yosef, Rabbi Amar Rabbi Oshia, Shuva Genuva, so the Gemara says, Va'ani Omer Ein Genuva. So this is very interesting. So Rabbi bar Yosef said like this, in Rabbi Oshia. Rabbi Oshia said, Rabbi Gamliel's answer to Proclus was not really a legitimate answer. It's not a legitimate answer, but Rabbi Chama says, I think it was a legitimate answer. Why wasn't it a legitimate answer? Magnufte, how there was a lashon is like a stolen answer. How was it a stolen answer? Dika amar lo zu umedes al pi habiv. Actually, we're going to stop over here for today. Have a minute to prepare for that. We'll say so again. We'll see the rest of this Gemara is a short Gemara, and tomorrow is a shorter daf. Hashem. So we'll say so again. We'll see in the rest of tomorrow's daf. Ultimately, again, how Rabbi Gamliel's response, ultimately again to Proclus, was not an machlokes. Was it an appropriate response, a legitimate response, or not? But we'll say, but again, halacha l'maaseh ein mashivim beis hamerchas. What a week! What a tremendous week! I will say a good night of Shabbos. All right, everyone, Zoom, have a great day, everyone. Good Shabbos, a meaningful and uplifting Tisha B'Av.